stage is all yours.
Hey, thanks. Hi, this is Lokesh here, the Vice President of the AGC. Been working with Amit since like more than 3-4 years now, and welcome all to the panel discussion.
Great, I can go next. My name is Tad Reeves. I'm an AEM architect with ICF Next, and I'll be moderating the discussion today. I've been working with Adobe Experience Manager and before that CQ for a little over 10 years now, and a lot of operations work, and happy to have this discussion today. Brad, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Brad Coleman. I'm an AEM architect with Rackspace Technology, and I've been with AEM since, I guess we should go by version numbers maybe instead of years. I think my first one was 5.3, something like that. So it's been a while. Joe, you want to go next?
Yeah, so I'm Joey Smith. I'm the Director of Client Enablement and DevOps Engineering, which really just means I'm the guy that solves all the problems for Hoodoo customers. I've been working with AEM for about 8 years now, and just really excited to talk about the operational side of things instead of always hearing about the developer half.
Cool. I can go next. Hi, I'm Anuj Ratra. I'm the Global Tech Lead for Amazon Web Services for Adobe Applications. I've been working with AEM for around about 8 years, back from the CQ days, on and off. Happy to be here to have this discussion with everyone.
Hey, Barnik, would you like to go next?
Yes, hi, this is Barnik here. I'm a AGC Global Board member. I'm a management consultant by profession, and very excited to be part of this panel, right? We started our journey of doing talks with Tad, I think in May, when we started the entire Adobe Experience Cloud, and this is another exciting topic. Look forward to a great panel discussion.
Thank you, everyone. So Tad, would you like to kick this off and we can dive right into the questions?
Absolutely. All right, good. So these are all going to be questions regarding AEM operations, maintenance, and so forth. And I guess we're just going to kick this off, and whoever wants to answer this first, this is going to be just a first come first serve sort of a thing. But if you have something particularly deep, we're going to take each question as long as it goes. So here goes the first one. So what mistakes do you commonly see people make when trying to self-host an AEM installation? Who wants to roll with that?
I can get us started if you want.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I guess the first one would probably be like maintenance tasks in general. You know, until online compatching kind of became a regular and useful thing, people really weren't running tar compactions and data storage GCs on a regular basis. In fact, I stumbled across several that had never been ran before. And, you know, when you have 35,000 tar files and, you know, 100 terabyte of data store, and it's never been cleaned up, that becomes really hard to maintain. Really hard to move around too, right? If you want to move to a managed provider. So maintenance tasks for sure. And, you know, I ran across some 30 gig log files and things like that that people just don't think about. The other thing that I found is with upgrades, I did run across one upgrade where the beta jar file was running in production, and like we had already been on to service pack 1 or 2 by that point. So just a few like regular kind of operations types things, best practices that hadn't been followed at that point.
Cool. Any of you want to chime in on that, Joey?
Yeah, sure. So my first thought here was the first problem I see is when they treat operations as an afterthought. A lot of times people think, you know, AEM, well, it's Felix, it's an OSGI container, I can just treat it just like any other platform. But when you get Sling and the JCR involved, things can get a little bit weird. If you're not familiar with AEM and its particular ways of behaving, that can really come back to bite you pretty quick. The second one, and I know some of you probably heard me preach on this topic for years now, but not paying proper attention to your caching layer, whether that's the dispatcher or the CDN. There's an organizational way of thinking. You have to have everybody in the project thinking about proper caching and making sure that you're paying off the cost of scaling the site statically everywhere that you can, because it just makes everything so much easier to leverage all the existing technologies we have and all the knowledge we have about how to scale things up, make them run faster, put them across multiple shards and things like that. And then the last one that I would say is people who manipulate CRXDE or the system console on live systems, just stop it already. You know, we've had this platform long enough. We should know now. Quit doing it. Let's get it into a code release. Let's get it pushed out through our continuous integration platform.
Perfect. Nuji, anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think some of the points that the other panelists have said, I just want to echo those first of all. And file data store. I've seen customers who are on-prem, they get with like really large files. I was talking with a customer and they had a 50 terabyte file, tar file on 6.1. And they were now trying to think about using S3. This is a classic example of customers not thinking about their future needs during an on-prem installation. So this is one. The second, caching, thinking about the different caching policies, not just at the dispatcher layer, the CDN, and even in fact at the browser layer, like what caching mechanisms you can put in by configuring the TTLs in the browser. Another common thing that I've seen is with DDoS protection. Not many customers think about DDoS protection mechanisms when they're on-prem. The other things which I have seen, which have like common occurrences, backup recovery and procedures. That's like the first thing that I come across. There are a lot of customers, they don't have a disaster recovery plan. They don't have proper backup and recovery procedures in place. Most of the customers that I come across, also, they don't have auto scaling set up. They usually have a static setup of one author, that's fronted by a 2 publisher dispatcher pair. And sometimes they just end up over provisioning or under provisioning. Another key area that I notice is on high availability. A lot of folks have their own definitions of what high availability means like. And let me say this, like 2 servers on the same rack are not highly available, although there's some, like high availability than a single server. A parallel setup doesn't ensure that you're highly available. There are multiple lines of faults, such as, they're using the same internet connection, the same physical location, power, and it's a big list to go.
That's great. Thanks for that. And also, it's good that you brought up DDoS protection. I think that pretty much all of us have had the experience of not just an external DDoS attack, but the worst and the most pervasive kind is the self DDoS attack, where you've got somebody who sends out an email list and you haven't thought through your caching tier. That the fact that you've got a marketing query string that gets appended onto something, and next thing you know, your marketing email just took down your own site when you were trying to send people there.
Yeah, the query string is has brought down more authors and publishers than anything else I've seen. So yeah,
absolutely. Now, one thing I wanted to bring up too before we get off this common mistakes thing, because we all talked about tech in this case in terms of tech mistakes, but what about personnel? What about mistakes that people may either over or under thinking what they need for personnel when trying to host AEM themselves?
Yeah, I think I see that a lot where the marketing team got sold on AEM as a platform, and they're all really excited about it, and then they just kind of lob it over the wall to the operations team and say, hey, good luck, try to keep this thing up for us, and the operations guys are just handed this thing, and they're trying to figure out, scrambling, trying to understand how it works as a platform. You really have to make sure that you're involving all the people who will be part of the project early enough on in the process that they can start to get into the platform and learning, okay, this is what we have to do, and whether that involves bringing on an external partner or just leveling up the skill set of the people that you already have.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of people also try to use their current very good Java developer to work on a new project for AEM, and unfortunately they don't know the ins and outs of AEM, and so just even having somebody come in early to say, okay, you definitely know what you're doing with Java and you definitely know what they want. Let me tell you how to best use your skills within AEM, because it's a little bit different and it's really hard to go back at the end and refactor things.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, cool. Next question. So from an operations and a maintenance perspective, what activities do you see that are most important to automate for an AEM site? Who wants to roll with that?
I can kick this off. So one thing that I have been doing pretty much my entire career in this field is trying to get to that golden standard of immutable infrastructure and being able to create at the push of a button a duplicate environment. And we want to be able to do that for testing and validation of our code releases as we're getting ready to go down to developing a new feature branch. We want to be able to do that so we can have content synchronization, so that no matter which version of our website, which environment we're looking at, that we're going to get the same behaviors and the same performance, the same content loaded on the page. It's also really critical for user acceptance. And then when you're trying to diagnose things, I remember my very first AEM project that I ever worked on, I was handed a ticket that was unreproducible in production. And I went to the architect of the project and they said, hey, I need to get a copy of this environment so that I can spin up a copy of the production environment so that I can attach a debugger or whatever it was I needed to do at the time. And that was such a painful process for us to get to that I immediately stopped my work as a developer and went to my VP at the time and said, hey, time out, we need to rethink how we're doing our infrastructure, because we can't have this answer be this difficult. It can't take me 3 days to spin up my development copy of the production environment just so that I can reproduce a problem. And then the next one that I would call out is validating your AEM backups. I worked with one customer where they had, so we tried to upgrade them from 6.4 to 6.5, and when it went through the in-place upgrade process, that failed. And when we looked into the error message, they'd had a silently corrupted tar MK for over 3 years. And
excellent.
Nobody knew it, and there was no notification of it. And it was only when you tried to hit a very certain node deep in a multi-terabyte DAM that you would get this error message, because it just could not find a reachable state for that node. And it took months to unwind that situation without losing content for that customer.
Yeah. And as from the AWS side of things, what have you seen in terms of things that are most important to automate? Because when people go to the cloud, this is something that constantly happens. Is you get folks that are taking a static on-premise mindset and trying to bring that directly to the cloud, and where you lovingly treat each instance like it's your own child and you never want it to go away, sort of a thing. What have you seen that people really need to focus on automating?
I think the first and foremost is, look for managed ways to do things, and that's going to take more off your plate, and you can focus your time on things that matter most to your customer. So given on those lines, I think, if you have, like, as, we said earlier, the, manual backup procedures, try automating them, try bringing in procedures that, do a self-check. Having a deployment pipeline, making sure that there is enough, CloudWatch, for example, from the AWS perspective, the CloudWatch metrics are set up to monitor the right metrics. AWS Health is set up. From an AEM perspective, you have the health check, to alert you for instances that you can see. Also, I would like to say, like, scaling is, one of the most important piece. When people move from on-prem to cloud, they just, go with a static setup. And I know in AEM, scaling is not that straightforward, and you have to write some custom code to handle the scaling logic. But that's where the benefit of the cloud is, to bring that elasticity. Like the example that you described earlier, you send out an email, then your whole website crashes. So those are some of the things that I look to automate.
Excellent. All right, cool. Let's go on to the next one, Amit. All right, here we go. What classes of tooling do you see as being most valuable in an AEM hosting environment? I think we could come up with a pretty impressive list here, but I'm interested to see what everybody feels is their most important classes of tooling. Who wants to hit it off first?
I can go. I don't think I found anybody who doesn't find something good about Jenkins that they can use. The thing that Jenkins does well is it has the plugins to hook into your code repository and then also your artifact repository, and then use the API within AEM to deploy as well. So it does several things. Probably doesn't do everything, but I think that's, it's a good tool to have. But one of the things that it doesn't do that we've also needed is, builds. So you need to do a build, and I don't know if you've used some tools that, it can do one build well, but then if that doesn't work, you have to blow it all away and redo that build. Ansible does a pretty good job with that piece. Basically, if you have a play that's going to build, a 10 instance environment, and you get 3/4 of the way through, and it has a problem with some little thing, maybe it was an infrastructure faux pas, and now you have to go back through and build it all again. The one thing Ansible does do is it will pick up where it left off. So different tools for different things, but those are two that I've found have worked well for their use case. And I think we all know like the Chef and Puppet and just a billion other things too, Bamboo and whatnot. So I'd be interested in hearing what you guys like.
A big one for Hoodoo over the years has been integration of the content management solution with the configuration management solution. So that, for example, if I've got 5 developers and they're working on a sprint, but we only have one non-production environment, then we have 3 different feature branches that all of a sudden we're trying to get pushed to the environment at the same time towards the end of the sprint to get that validated by the end users. So if you really want to optimize that process, you have to get to where individual feature branches can spin up their own isolated development environment that you can then do that validation and testing on. And we've seen this as the industry's gone from waterfall to the fixed iteration concept and on to continuous delivery, where the way we change, the way we release, the way features are done just kind of changes. So what we have done at Hoodoo is we've created a bunch of tooling, which we called AEM Cloud, and that was years before Adobe had started talking about AEM as a cloud service. And it was, I think in a lot of ways, it was the genesis of what Hoodoo Digital was as an organization. And one of the things that I was actually brought into Hoodoo Digital to be part of was to take that tooling that we had created, and it includes things like, secrets management and content synchronization, pluggable logging and monitoring. And we're trying right now to get that suite of tooling that we've created to where we can open source it. We have multiple developers who are working on that, cleaning it up and abstracting away all the customer specific things we did initially so that we can push that out to the community as an open source project.
That's awesome. Now, I know I'm not a panelist, but one thing too that I would love to bring up, just trailing off of what you just said, is monitoring tooling. That's one thing that to me often comes as an afterthought, and people scope out the project that they've got for AEM and scope out their costs and so forth, and say, good, so much is going to cost to host it, so much is going to cost to buy AEM. We don't have money for Splunk and New Relic and stuff, so we're just going to leave that off. And that is, to me, is one of the most egregious mistakes you can make to not be able to have visibility on this multi-million-dollar investment that you just made, because so often that's the one thing that's going to make the biggest difference between a site that's maintainable and one that just you can throw as many engineers as you want at it, and they're still going to take forever to be able to get to the bottom of problems without proper log aggregation and proper APM tooling. This is your application performance monitoring tooling. Of the class of like New Relic or Dynatrace or AppDynamics. So that sort of thing of being able to have dashboarding that'll show you really at a glance of what's going on with your system. I think that's, to me, is one of the most important classes of tooling that commonly gets overlooked. All right, cool. Let's go on to the next one, because we have a couple chunky questions coming up. All right. Should every AEM environment be hosted in the cloud? And is there any case to be made for an on-premise installation in a corporate or colo data center? So, Joey, I know that you had had something that you wanted to bring to the table on this. I want to let you go first here.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I hope everybody's going to bear with me because I always feel like my answer to this feels a little bit like admitting that I just don't like Star Wars all that much. That if I give the wrong answer, somebody's going to take away my DevOps engineering card, you know. So I just wanted to make sure that I get out the thought as clearly as I can. And what it comes down to for me is that while I do agree that most things should be in the cloud, I still remain a little bit skeptical. And I'm a bit of a Luddite, which I know sounds funny for somebody in the career that I'm in. But just industry-wide, I'm not sure that we're sufficiently evolved yet in our practice and procedures around cloud infrastructure to just make a blanket statement like that. There are way too many failures still inside of organizations where cloud data governance got away from the organization for me to say that anything should always be in the cloud. And an obvious example that we can pick on here is unsecured S3 buckets. And this is not Amazon's fault, right? This is the organizational practice, the internal company practices that are to blame for this. And we can even look at Netflix, who I think we would all agree is kind of one of the poster children for cloud adoption. And just a month ago, they had a bunch of internal documents and employee records and things like that leaked publicly via an unsecured S3 bucket. And what has it been? I think 10 years that we've all known that unsecured S3 buckets are a problem. And we're still seeing this problem spread. And that's a well-known issue. You know, just yesterday I was reading an article about some scientists who found a way to snoop on conversations by using a telescope and looking across at the surface of a light bulb and measuring the changes in light and the fluctuations in the glass of the bulb. They were able to record the conversation or recreate the conversation well enough that they could use Shazam to identify a song that was playing in the room just by observing the surface of the light bulb. And I wonder, what are the things about cloud data governance that are the equivalent of that, where people haven't even yet dreamt up the way that these things can be attacked? So I just feel like there's still too much ground to be covered in our industry, figuring out what those good, better, and best solutions look like for cloud data governance. For me to tell a customer with a straight face, you should always be in the cloud 100% of the time. I do think everyone should consider the cloud. That's an unequivocal yes. You should definitely be asking yourself the question. But is it always the right answer for every organization today? Probably not. But if you're my customer and you're telling me cloud is not right for us, then we're going to have a really intense dialogue about the reasons why not.
That's awesome. I'd love for you to follow that up as the cloud provider employee viewpoint.
So I want to take a different angle to this question. So first of all, there's no size fits all, you know, before we jump to a conclusion. So I'd like to listen to customers and draw up, you know, arguments that support an on-premise installation, and then, you know, arguments that support cloud installation. So let's start with the on-prem installation. So the first one that I hear is latency. I hear from customers that their workload has a critical requirement to adhere to extremely low latency. And you know, usually this is, in my mind, like an anti-pattern, because there is something in the way the customers have architected their application, which is adding to the latency. You know, that may be the lack of caching policies, either at the dispatcher layer, a CDN, or browser layer. So that's one piece of it. The second is integration or interoperability challenges. We have the AEM workload that integrates or uses other services which are on-prem or tightly coupled, and you know, like are required for direct execution, and for XYZ reasons, those applications aren't supported, can't be moved, you know, to the cloud. So for scenarios like this, now there are better mechanisms available to connect your on-prem data center so that your AEM installation can talk to these legacy applications. For example, there is AWS Direct Connect, which is a dedicated internet connection between AWS and the customer's data center. And the last one that I hear for the on-prem installation is security and compliance. That we have specialized software that needs to run, for security and compliance reasons. We have regulatory requirements to encrypt data at rest. We need single tenancy. We have a web application firewall that we want to use, to front the entire traffic that comes, like to either the AEM instances or to other workloads in our organization. And sometimes even like we have a layer 7 device that needs to just front all the traffic because that records everything. So most of these customers, they're not aware of the security which is available in the cloud. For example, like just talking about AWS, AWS has achieved a number of internationally recognized certification and accreditations. And AWS's scale allows significantly more investment in security policing and countermeasures than almost any large company can afford themselves. As far as there are other concerns about, there are mechanisms to encrypt data at rest and data in transit. Although AWS services can be configured to run behind a corporate load balancer, but I would not recommend that setup because the corporate load balancer becomes the single point of failure. And then that architecture doesn't scale as your rest of the AWS cloud infrastructure would scale. Now, let's talk about the benefits of running in the cloud. Everybody knows that moving in cloud gives you the agility. You can provision servers on the fly. You can provision them quickly. You get the benefit of innovation of all the new services that are being added in the cloud, whether it comes to AI, ML, or other sophisticated tooling. Cost, most of the customers, they don't know their true cost of ownership when they are running applications on-prem. Elasticity, as we said, we send a blast email out and next thing we know is like the entire infrastructure comes down. And the last is global footprint. Most companies are either like on a path to become global or are global, and being with a cloud provider gets you exposed to regions and move into continents that you don't have a presence in. So talking about both sides of the coin, I think in the end it just boils down to having trained staff in cloud operations, and this is exactly the same point that was echoed by Joey. And the business visibility and and the interest to evaluate these trade-offs between cloud and on-prem installations. And sometimes either lack of awareness or lack of trained staff, customers decide to stick with this status quo on this.
Awesome, thanks for that. And I think that your last point there kind of segues into one of our next questions, which comes down to staff, because you had mentioned that a lot of people aren't simply aware of what sort of security options you have in AWS or in other cloud platforms like Azure or Google Cloud, and that in and itself is a problem, because if you're not aware of how to properly secure it, you're not going to be able to properly secure it. And so a lot of it doesn't come down to is AWS secure? It's, do you have the personnel there who can properly audit your entire application infrastructure and usability to ensure that that it is implemented securely and continues to be implemented securely. All right, Amit, let's go on to the next one here. All right, that's interesting. If you were going to name 3 things that are the most important to a smooth running AEM environment, what would you target? All right, Brad, you want to kick this one off?
Sure, yeah. My first one would be probably the initial layout or the structure of your content. What you want to do with your site, there's always 3 ways to do everything in AEM. It's just kind of, it's been stacked on top of each other over the years, and so there are different ways to do things. What you want to do with your site is going to be dependent. If you're a very geolocation based website, because you have so many locations, and that might drive how you lay out your content. You can't have everything be a query string because that's not cacheable, or at least it becomes very difficult. So that initial layout is really important, of just talking with the developers and say like, hey, let's get your content tree laid out the way it should be. Let's use the right methods of building these templates and coding to it. The second one for me is synthetic and performance monitoring. Really, not only do you need like transactional monitoring to tell you whether something is up, and not just at the CDN level or the dispatcher level, but all the way through to the publisher level. You need those different layers, but you also really do need performance monitoring. Your APM tools such as AppDynamics or Dynatrace or New Relic, those things will catch problems before they become big problems. So let's say, hey, we had a spike, things ran a little slow for a few minutes. Well, that's in the past, I can't tell you what happened. No, actually you can go back, pull up exactly what was happening at that time, look at those transactions, figure out which one's having a problem, drill down into possibly even, and with some of these tools, down into the level of, this class is really causing the issue. You go look at that and find it, oh yeah, that would have been a huge issue when that email blast goes out and we try and run this thing. It would not have scaled. So that performance monitoring is really important in addition to just kind of your synthetics. The third one for me is really communication and documentation. We communicate at Rackspace, we really want to have a regular communication with our client. We want to talk with them weekly or every other week. What's important to you this week? What issues are you having? I mean, we have a ticketing system like everybody, right? But what is your priority right now? What did you hear from your boss yesterday that needs to be done by the end of the week? What's coming up in a month? What's your next release? All those things don't happen through tickets or even email, and you need to communicate. It also kind of builds some trust, and then you need to write all that stuff down, right? You got to have some documentation, not only on your technical stuff, but what's coming up. Are we all on the same page on this release date? Why the timing is important. And then if you have a problem, just grab that problem and throw it into your wiki or your documentation and run look for that client so that you don't have to repeat it again. I mean, that's a number one thing for me. So yeah, that's my three. I'm interested in hearing about your three so I can learn something here.
Great. All right, Joe, you want to hit next?
Sure. Yeah, actually, my number one is pretty much Brad's number three, which is a healthy relationship between the development operations and the business users, because nothing can tank an AEM deployment quite as fast as organizational dysfunction. Whether it's a developer building a solution and lobbing that over the wall saying, hey, you know what, it's ops problems now, or whether it's the operation team making changes that are undocumented or unannounced to the production environment, to where previously working code all of a sudden starts tipping over the instances, or whatever kind of behavior problems you get there, or really even just the engineering resources and the business users seeing each other as enemies or as barriers to quote unquote getting the real work done. My experience is that the nature of AEM as a business facing solution to engineering problems makes it unusually susceptible to that kind of organizational dysfunction. The second thing I had was that backups, which are regularly validated by automation. Now, what a validated backup looks like for any given AEM instance is probably a little bit different, and is probably a panel in and of itself that we could talk for a few hours about. But over the years, AEM has proved to me far more than any other piece of software I've ever worked with the mantra of an untested backup is no backup at all. And then my third one was to just, again, I realize I've been harping on this. People have heard me. I toured the country at meetups, harping on this point for 6 years. Stop directly manipulating your CRXDE or system console for running systems. In my opinion, it's a simple governance change that any organization could put in place today. You just decide, we're going to stop doing this. Now, there are some mechanical pieces that then you have to go figure out, okay, how are we going to start getting these changes out to the production systems? But just right away deciding today is the last day I will ever directly manipulate my production systems on the system console starts driving noticeably better engineering practices in the development work. And you'll see both better behavior from the platform and better practices just have to naturally grow as a result of that governance decision.
Absolutely. The screams of terror that you have to endure from all the developers who realize that they can't get into the system console anymore. Yep, I did absolutely change the password on you. You are totally locked out. I'm sorry about that. Anuj, what do you have to say on this one?
So the number one thing, I don't think I have like three things, but the number one thing I'd like to say is just the working backups is foremost important, but like, can you really stand up a whole infrastructure with that working backup? More or less times I have seen that the backups are not like true in nature. The best question to ask is how much time will it take me to stand up the site from scratch? So, or in other words, like how soon can I roll back to a previous point, and like how long in time can I go back to? Those are the two most important things or questions you have to answer. If you haven't answered them as an organization, then you've not bought that insurance policy about what happens when things go wrong. And trust me, things go wrong all the time. And there might be like multiple reasons contributing to it.
I absolutely agree, and this is something that gets asked all the time in terms of what is the right disaster recovery solution for Adobe Experience Manager. And people are always talking about, they want to do, they want to start from scratch with their small to medium sized site with a massive, clustering something or other, just because of whatever disaster that they envision. But really, the best disaster recovery is to be able to, on an automated basis, stand back up that instance that you had as rapidly as you can. You've got a backup that's an hour old or 24 hours old or whatever the right interval is, and if something goes horribly wrong, if somebody goes and mistakenly deletes some /Etsy out of the repository or something like that, that you can just go and push a button and good, that was the 8 a.m. backup that I took, which gets validated all the time, and I just stood it back up in US West 1, and there we go, and we're back up and running. That sort of automation is your best DR, rather than trying to have some hokey clustering setup that may or may not actually be helping you in the long run.
My favorite is people who deactivate /content. Oh man, the number of times I've had customers call me up that have done that, I'm like, but it popped up a dialog box and it said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Why did you click yes?"
And they're just kind of just shaking their head at you, saying, "Man, I don't know."
Oh, I stopped reading that dialog box. Well,
all right. Let's move on to the next question here. All right, so here's an interesting one. So what value does a managed hosting provider bring to the table, whether it's Adobe's Managed Services or another Adobe partner? Now, this is one that I want to take up in detail, seeing as though there's a lot of different options that people have these days in terms of how to bring your AEM environment out into the public. You can try to do it all yourself. Adobe has Adobe Managed Services, as well as their new AEM as a cloud service. Which has its own pluses and minuses, and then we've got two different hosting providers represented here. We've got Hoodoo and Rackspace, and ICF Next does as well. So what would you say in terms of the value that a managed hosting provider brings to the table to somebody bringing their AEM environment out? Brad, you're first on my list here, so you want to go over that?
Sure. Yeah, the way that I thought about this was that, websites are just a very complex layered structure, right? They got when somebody types something on the web, I mean, they're hitting so many things before they get to your AEM installation. So knowing all those layers and how they, how each one behaves and impacts, that's very complex to begin with. But then you take AEM, which is a very complex CMS, and you've essentially created 10 different skill sets that are required in order to know how this whole thing works from beginning to end. And so the way that I think about, a managed hosting provider, or managed services providers, which is what my team does at Rackspace, we're trying to provide you most of those skill sets. We're trying to get you people who know the infrastructure, the network layer, all the interactions therein. And then when you get down to the actual servers that are running AEM, which are also layered, with your dispatcher, publisher, author, what all of those do, and when things go wrong, how to fix them. beyond that, how to help you and your developers get to a point where you can do the things with AEM that you wanted to do. So I'm looking at 10 different skill sets that all need to, you know, does a client want to go hire all of those, or do they want to bring in somebody who can do, you know, gosh, maybe 7 of them, and then they only have to really worry about designing it and maybe developing it, which, you know, again, you know, we could provide that, or we could partner with somebody to provide that as well. We basically want to give you as many jobs, you know, written off of your list that you don't want to manage. So if you are just a client who doesn't know much about the web and you want to hire the whole thing out, I think that's a great thing to do. Partner with someone who can really help you with that and get you where you want to go. If you already have the in-house, you know, three jobs that, you know, of knowing what you want, designing it, and being able to develop it, and you just need somebody to take the rest of that, great, come to us and we can do that too. I think that, and I think we all do that, I'm sure, at different layers, but when I think about that, I just kind of like broke it down to all these different jobs that you would have to hire for and how complex each one of those are. It's just nice to be able to partner with somebody to take care of most of those. Joey, I'd be curious
Yeah.
what your perspective is on this as well.
So I actually, like I said earlier, I started out my journey with AEM as a developer, and that lasted about a grand total of 6 months.
Me too.
when I kept seeing organizations buy AEM, and then, like I mentioned earlier, just kind of lobbing it at the IT team and saying, "Hey guys, figure this out for us, make it work." And I kept hearing customers come back and saying, "We really regret buying AEM." And when we dug into what the basis for that regret was, it turned out to mostly be we did not appreciate the amount of specialized knowledge that goes into having a healthy AEM deployment. And so we started our first managed service practice just as a way of making sure that our customers continued to be an Adobe partner, you know, have that relationship with Adobe. We didn't want people to buy AEM and then have this massive regret, you know, this buyer's remorse over it, just because nobody was thinking through for them all of these different issues. And Brad, you called out some really good points of a lot of what those issues are. There are all these different layers that somebody's got to think through, and most IT departments out there today are already overworked, underfunded, and they're constantly being thrown platforms, whether they're internally developed platforms or whether it's the NPM project du jour, you know, whatever the source of that constant churn rate is, they just can't reasonably be expected in most cases to take the time to really learn, this is what AEM needs. I need to understand the dispatcher and the impact an improper query string situation can have on my publish instances. You know, I need to be able to say, I've set up my WAF correctly, whether I have a WAF application out front or whether I have, sorry, I should say web application firewall. I shouldn't acronym things. Or whether, you know, just be, I'm using the dispatcher, or, you know, we've got a CDN and how does the CDN play? And now I've got, you know, I've got things that have to be purged from the author to the publisher to the dispatcher to the CDN, or maybe there's no maybe there's no dispatcher in between. All these questions, somebody has to think all these things through, and having somebody who says, you know what, I've come in, I have done this 50 times before. I've done it from companies the size of 15 employees up to a company the size of, you know, thousands of employees. Nothing is new here for me. Let me show you all the painful mistakes that I've made. And I've shared this before with other people, that one of the things that I did when I very first got my hands on AEM was I deleted some tar files from the tar MK. You know, back then it was, I can't remember what they called it. The
RPM.
Yeah, there you go, tar PM. So I just deleted some tar files from underneath it because I wanted to see what happened. And then I had to figure out how to rebuild the environment so that things could at least work again from that. That's a thing that most people have probably never done. You need somebody on your implementation who can look at a situation like that and say, that is not a recoverable situation. We've got to go to the backup. Or they can say, you know what, let's shut AEM down. Let's run run against it, and we'll be back up and running in a couple hours.
Absolutely. And then and coming off of what you said on how thin IT budgets are and stuff these days. So I mean, back when I first started in the business, there was this title that one could have called webmaster, and you remember that one?
I do remember that one.
Yeah, where you could be the guy who would make the little HTML updates to the page, and you'd have your meager graphic design skills, but you would also run the web server and do your WSFTP or whatever the heck to get your files up there. You basically did absolutely everything. We are so far beyond that right now, where any one person or team could really be expected to develop the site and be responsible for for everything that goes into its operation. You know what I mean? When it comes to something as complicated as an AEM deployment. And then you add on to that all of the various requirements that your that any company can run into these days. You've got some that have a lean development team and they just want to get stuff up there. They've got a brand new net new AEM site. They really might be a fabulous fit for just using something like AEM as a cloud service, where it's just a content site. They just want to just get their stuff up there and make it go. Some others might come to you and say, I'm just like any other average AEM site, except for I've got this custom search engine. And we want to use Varnish instead of the dispatcher. And we've also got this custom authentication handler, but it's average, right? And then you're like, well, okay, then you need folks to be able to go and handle that. And sometimes it's because of that one size fits all factor of AEM, you can't only have a single hosting entity that goes and attempts to host everything under a 80th percentile type of a setup. You definitely need somebody who's platform agnostic and who can say, okay, we'll get your stuff up on Azure or we'll get your stuff up on AWS, or we'll work with your on-premise hosting or something like that. There's a lot of different folks that need to be brought into the mix.
Even people who are using AMS, I think it's good to have somebody, because as much as I've worked with the guys at AMS, in fact, some of them have been my employees in the past, having somebody who familiarizes themselves with the business and the business's concerns and their specific challenges, and then can turn around to the AMS CSE and say, here is what this customer is really going to need at the end of the day. That's a critical role to have.
Yeah, it's a translator. We're trying to take what people want and turn that into technical speak that the people at the end of the line need to know. And that very much can lead to a lot of time lost in projects when you just can't make that translation. So absolutely agree with that.
I'd like to add one more point to it. I think a managed service provider lets you look around the corners that may have been easily ignored. And we've heard like multiple examples of this, like CDN, WAF, DDoS, APM tools. But the second most important thing is, even after you have all those tools, sometimes customers, they don't know what to look for. So a managed provider can help there. Numerous times, you'll have like a APM tool, to give you all the insights, but you don't really know how to action off of them. What is important, because there's going to be large sum of information. So, which one is most relevant to act on, and, how to act on it. So a managed service provider can, help you navigate those, finance.
Let's move on to the last question here, because I think we're running a bit low on time. I want to be able to get to some Q&A from the attendees here. All right, good. So from an operations and a readiness perspective, what should teams do to prepare their sites for the future, regardless of whether AEM as a cloud service is a viable option for your company or not? Joe, you want to lead off here?
Sure, absolutely. The first thing I would say is just automate everything you can. Automation is a force multiplier that allows people to focus on other higher value tasks, the things that my computer code can't do for me, I can now focus on. It delivers the increased confidence in the solution that we've built when we can say, you know what, this is a 100% repeatable process. Every time I run through the build, I get the exact same environment out the other end. And it reduces your time to value for all the future efforts that you put into the project. The next thing I would say is to form that alliance between the operations group and the development group. You know, if you haven't bought into DevOps as a concept yet, it's time. Like, get there, guys. There's no reason that there should be a Chinese wall, so to speak, between these two groups within your organization. If you've just paid lip service to it till now, make sure that you're taking the people who live on one side of the fence and getting them to cross-train and walk a mile in the shoes, so to speak, of the people who live on the other side of the fence. When both of those organizations are working well together, then they need to learn how to eat, breathe, and absolutely sleep the real world daily challenges of your marketing communications team. You know, I went into one organization a few years ago where we looked at the IT side of everything and we're like, yeah, you guys are doing everything right. Can't figure out why this project isn't being more successful. And we went and we sat with the business side of things and said, you know, this all sounds great. We're not sure why you guys are having the trouble that you're having. But when you got both teams in the same room, they really felt like they were enemies. They argued with each other. They pointed fingers at each other and said, you know what, that team's stopping us from getting our job done. When the two halves of that organization are working in harmony, you can actually deliver the value the business needs to succeed. And you get caught in this awesome, virtuous upward spiral of success where fewer projects fail, fewer people burn out, and projects have a lot less scope creep.
Good, Brad, you want to hit that next?
Sure. I totally agree with that. I would say don't delay your upgrades. It will be a harder project if you try and come into a new you know, if you're trying to move to something new and you have an older version of AEM or something really unique. Let's say you've hard coded to a specific service pack or feature pack or something. Those are kind of hard. So if you're not able to keep up with the latest, or you're not able to upgrade, that's probably a red flag. Also, I guess I would say keep things pruned. Your automation is definitely a good option here, but the biggest and most lengthy, I guess, projects I've seen have been with data stores that had never been cleaned up before. You know, like 150 terabyte data store is going to be much harder to move than one that's been cleaned up is only, you know, 80 terabyte. So those types of things will matter. And if you wait until you're ready to migrate, that is going to delay your migration quite a bit. So those two things, I think, upgrades and keeping your things pruned. Yeah.
Great. Anish, what are your thoughts here?
I would say look at the business outcomes you want as an organization. See where you want to be from a technology perspective, you know, in a couple of years from now, as well as from a business perspective, and knock down all the barriers, you know, as pointed by Joey, you know, between the DevOps teams and the business teams. So those are the most important things that I would look at. You know, define like what the business outcomes look like, and then work backwards from there. You know, put the infrastructure you need in place to get you over there. And of course, automation is definitely like an important piece to let you focus on the outcomes that matter the most.
Great. All right, good. So we've got a lot of amazing questions that have been asked both in the chat and in the Q&A, and we're going to try to get to these, but we're probably going to end up having to close off the call before getting to these, but we're going to hang around for a little while after these and see if we can bash out some answers to this. But I'm going to see if I can grab one of these questions here that we can take up while everybody is still on. Let's see here. Well, here's one on the bottom of the list, which is still interesting. Is there anything unique that AMS brings to the table that other solution providers cannot? Is there a compelling reason to go to another provider other than the company that developed AEM? What do competitors do better than AMS?
So I can jump in here and provide one perspective. So AMS definitely will have an option for pricing that that other partners can't give you. I know that a lot of our customers have looked at to say, you know, I just get a better deal from Adobe when I purchase the AMS hosting with the software, and that's great. You know what? I am not here to say yeah, you have to use me because I'm better at XYZ. Now, I do definitely think there are things that I do a little bit better than AMS, broadly speaking. Again, you know, we talked about even if you have AMS, you want someone like us on your team that can come in and can say, you know what, we are gonna understand your business, because a lot of times for Adobe Managed Services, it's a turnkey solution. Like, you have to come to them knowing what you want, and you have to ask the right questions. You have to prepare the run book. You have to do these things that Adobe says, you know, this is the box that you have to fit in, and you need somebody to come in and say, let me customize what you're trying to do, and let me tell you how to make what you're doing fit inside the box that Adobe has defined. And so whether you're saying, as a result, now I'm going to go with you as a hosting partner because I've learned that you guys are going to customize your answers to my problems, or whether you're just saying we're going to add you as part of the team with Adobe Managed Services as the delivery platform, either way, you got to have somebody that lives that world for you.
Totally agreed.
Yeah, I guess, kind of echo that their AEM is so customizable. There's so many different things you can do with AEM and so many different ways to do that. They don't all fit into the slot that AMS would want them to. So I do feel that, yeah, there's this kind of middle layer of client that is going to fit well to AMS. They're running a type of website that has the options that they provide really well and just run right out of the box really well. That's awesome. A lot of our customers that come to us are looking for a little bit more customization, or they want maybe access into their servers more than they were getting with AMS, so that they can do more and partner with us to explore new options and things that AEM can do. And you know, sometimes I mean, you can get good support here and then somebody else not have good support there, but I feel like that with my particular group, we do offer a very high level of support, so that we try and be very responsive and get ahead of a lot of issues with our APM tooling. So those are, I don't really have a lot of experience with the comparative on AMS, but when customers come to us, those are things that they're pleased with. So I guess I'll say that.
Great. I'm not sure if you want to jump in now and cut me down, because I think we could talk about this for quite some time. The stimulating conversation-o-meter is probably still on the high side here.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. No, I think we are right on time. So just want to thank you all for joining, and it'll be great to have another session on a different topic. To all those who have joined us, I think we have about 91, 92 attendees. So thank you all for coming, and looking forward to seeing you again next time.
And if you're not part of the AEM Tech Slack, join it. You can find all the panelists there, and we'd be happy to continue these conversations.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, everyone, again.
All right, thanks, you guys.
Thanks, everybody.